Off-duty cops try to drown a black veteran in a public pool, thinking he's an easy target. But their cruel lesson awakens a dormant warrior, unleashing a set of skills they are not prepared to handle. The chemical scent of chlorine was a comfort, a bleach that scrubbed the world clean. For Marcus Thorne, the turquoise water of the Oak Valley Community Pool was more than just a place to cool off, it was a sanctuary. The rhythmic pull and glide of a steady lap lane was a meditation, a physical mantra that kept the ghosts of Helmand Province at bay. At 40, the retired Special Forces Master Sergeant wore his service not in boastful tattoos, but in the quiet, disciplined economy of his movements and the watchful stillness in his eyes. His 7-year-old daughter, Maya, shrieked with delight in the shallow end, her bright pink floaties a beacon of pure joy. Her laughter was the only sound that truly penetrated the low hum of his post-traumatic stress. This was his new mission, protecting that sound. The calm shattered with the arrival of 3 men. They carried themselves with an unearned swagger, their loud laughs slicing through the peaceful afternoon haze. Marcus recognized the type instantly, men who mistook aggression for strength. They were off-duty cops, he'd seen them around town. The youngest, a wiry officer named Miller, had a cruel smirk permanently etched on his face. His partner, Davis, was a younger, dough-faced follower, eager to please. The third, Sergeant Hank Russo, was a bull of a man, thick-necked and heavy-jawed, with eyes that had long lost any hint of compassion. They settled on a bench near Marcus's, their conversation deliberately loud. Miller's gaze kept flicking to Marcus and Maya. "Place is getting crowded these days," Miller said, loud enough for half the pool to hear. "Letting just about anyone in." Marcus met his gaze, held it for a beat, and then turned his attention back to his daughter. "Don't engage. De-escalate. The mantra of a civilian." Russo grunted. "Tell me about it. Some people don't know their place." The aggression was a magnetic pull, a familiar gravity Marcus had spent years trying to escape. He gathered his towel. "Maya, sweetie, 5 more minutes, okay?" But it was too late. Miller and Davis sauntered over to the edge of the pool, blocking his path. "Hey, pal," Miller started, his tone dripping with false friendliness. "You a member here? This is a private community pool." "I am," Marcus said, his voice level and calm. Russo lumbered over, crossing his massive arms. He looked from Marcus to Maya and back again. "We've had some complaints. About a guy, matching your description, making people uncomfortable." It was a classic escalation script, one he'd seen deployed in a dozen countries, and now it was here, in his own backyard. "There's no problem here, Sergeant," Marcus said, using the rank to show he knew who they were. The acknowledgement only seemed to infuriate Russo. "The problem is you don't know when to show respect. You're talking to law enforcement, boy." He jabbed a thick finger into Marcus's chest. "Maybe you need a lesson." Before Marcus could even process the move, Russo shoved him hard. The world tilted, the shocked face of his daughter, the blue sky, the glint of the sun on the water, and then the cold shock of the pool enveloped him. He surfaced, sputtering, his first thought for Maya, but a heavy weight landed on his shoulders. Russo's hand slammed down on his head, forcing him under. Through the churning, distorted water, he saw their faces, laughing. They were trying to drown him. Panic is a luxury a soldier cannot afford. As water flooded his sinuses, Marcus's training took over. The pool was no longer a sanctuary, it was a battle space. The enemy was larger, had superior numbers, and was using the environment as a weapon. His mind went cold and sharp. Russo's weight was immense, but he was using brute force, predictable and inefficient. Marcus didn't fight against the downward pressure, he redirected it. He let his body go limp for a fraction of a second, causing Russo to overcommit his weight. In that instant, Marcus twisted, planting his feet on the rough concrete of the pool wall. He exploded outward. It wasn't a kick, it was a targeted strike. His heel connected precisely with the side of Russo's knee, a peroneal strike. The sergeant's leg buckled instantly. The hand on Marcus's head vanished as Russo roared in pain, his own weight now dragging him awkwardly sideways. Miller and Davis, seeing their leader falter, moved in. Miller grabbed for Marcus's head again. Underwater, Marcus saw the arm coming. He didn't block it, he guided it past his head, gripped the wrist, and used Miller's own momentum to pull the younger cop off balance and face first into the water. Davis, ever the follower, hesitated. That was his mistake. Marcus surfaced, took a single, controlled breath, and submerged again. He moved beneath Davis, his hand finding the cop's ankle. A sharp, powerful tug was all it took. Davis went down with a surprised gurgle, flailing in unfamiliar territory. Within 10 seconds, the dynamic had completely inverted. Marcus stood in the chest-deep water, breathing calmly. Russo was clinging to the pool's edge, clutching his knee. Miller was coughing up chlorinated water, his face a mask of shock and rage. Davis was struggling to find his footing in the shallow end. From a nearby lounge chair, an older Asian man with a weathered face and the unmistakable posture of a fellow veteran, David Chen, watched with sharp, knowing eyes. He had seen it all. He assaulted us. Miller screamed, the moment he found his voice. He pointed a shaking finger at Marcus. Everybody saw it. He attacked 3 police officers. Russo, recovering, bellowed, "He's resisting arrest. Someone call 911. The few onlookers, who had been frozen in confusion, now found a narrative they could understand. A large, menacing black man had just violently taken down 3 white men, 3 cops. Their faces shifted from shock to suspicion, then to hostility. A young lifeguard, intimidated by the badges and the shouting, fumbled for his whistle, his eyes wide with fear. The truth drowned in the same water where they had tried to drown him. Marcus looked at their faces, then at his terrified daughter standing by the pool's edge, and knew this fight was far from over. David Chen met Marcus at the pool exit, his expression grim. "You need to be careful, son," the older man said, his voice low. "Those aren't just any cops. Russo's uncle is a retired judge. Cormac Russo. He still runs this town from his golf cart." Marcus nodded, toweling a shivering Maya. He knew the type. Power that didn't come from a badge, but from a name. The system moved with chilling speed. Before they were even home, a biased story appeared on a local news blog, citing an anonymous, police union source. It painted Marcus as an unhinged aggressor with a violent past, attacking officers who were politely enforcing pool rules. His military service was twisted to suggest he was a trained killer, a danger to the community. That evening, a marked police cruiser began making slow, deliberate passes in front of their small suburban house. The message was clear: "We know where you live." Lena, Marcus's wife, stood at the window, her arms wrapped around herself. A nurse who dealt with life and death every day, she had a strength Marcus admired, but this was a different kind of fear. "What are we going to do, Marcus?" she whispered. "They're trying to scare us." "It's what they do," he said, pulling her close. The scent of antiseptic on her scrubs was a comfort. The doorbell rang, sharp and official. 2 uniformed officers stood on their porch. They weren't from the local precinct. Their faces were impassive. "Marcus Thorne?" one asked. "Yes. We're here to conduct a preliminary inquiry regarding a complaint of aggravated assault on law enforcement officers." The officers' eyes were cold. "We have statements from 3 decorated officers and multiple civilian witnesses. It's not looking good for you." The other officer let his gaze drift pointedly toward Maya, who was hiding behind Lena's legs. "You're a veteran, right? Got those government benefits? A family? It would be a shame for all that to get complicated." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't about an arrest. It was about dismantling his life, piece by piece. "My husband was defending himself," Lena said, her voice trembling with rage. They tried to drown him in front of his daughter. The lead officer gave a dismissive smirk. That's not the story we're hearing, ma'am. We're just here to let you know an official investigation is underway. We'd advise you to retain a lawyer. And to keep a low profile. They left, leaving behind an official-looking envelope on the table. It wasn't a summons, but a notice of a pending investigation by the department's internal affairs, a department they knew would be loyal to its own. The system wasn't just biased, it was a weapon pointed directly at them. They were utterly alone. The warning came in the dead of night. Not with a rock through the window, but with something more chillingly intimate. Marcus woke to the hiss of compressed air. He moved to the window to see two of their car's tires deflating in the driveway. And there, on the clean concrete, freshly painted in stark black and white, was a thin blue line flag. It was a symbol of solidarity for some, but here, in the dark, it was a brand. A mark of ownership. You belong to us. We can touch you whenever we want. Lena was silent, her face pale in the moonlight. Fear was a corrosive acid, eating away at the foundations of the life they had fought so hard to build. The next day, David Chen called. Heard you had some car trouble, he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt about what he meant. Bring it by the shop. And you. Come, too. An idle mind is a dangerous neighborhood. David's auto shop was a cathedral of grease and steel. The air smelled of oil, metal, and hard work. In the back, under a tarp, sat a half-restored 1968 Ford Mustang. My project, David said, handing Marcus a wrench. She needs focus. So do you. 4 hours, they worked. They didn't talk about the case. They talked about carburetors, about torque, about the clean lines of classic American muscle. The physical labor, the singular focus required to seat a gasket or tighten a bolt, became a new kind of meditation for Marcus. It was a way to channel the silent, screaming rage into something constructive. As they worked, David shared his own story. He'd come back from Vietnam, a decorated soldier, only to be met with spit and slurs. He'd faced a different kind of enemy at home, one that smiled to your face while denying you a job, a home loan, a measure of peace. They want to make you feel like a rabid dog, Marcus, David said, his hands stained with grease. They poke you and poke you, waiting for you to bite, so they can say, see? We told you he was dangerous. The trick is not to bite. He tapped the Mustang's fender. You become an engineer. You learn how the machine works. And you find its weaknesses. You don't let them turn you into the monster they want you to be. In that dusty garage, surrounded by tools and the ghost of a different war, Marcus found a new kind of dojo. He wasn't learning to fight. He was relearning how to build. David wasn't just a mentor, he was a lifeline, a reminder that honor and dignity were muscles that, even when torn, could be repaired. The system's pressure was relentless. A week later, while shopping for groceries with Maya, Marcus was publicly humiliated. Sergeant Russo, on duty and in full uniform, cornered him in the cereal aisle. On the pretense of a report of shoplifting, Russo subjected him to a loud, invasive pat-down, making a show for the other shoppers. He found nothing, of course. Just keeping the community safe, Russo said with a predator's smile, before walking away. Marcus later learned the store's security footage of the incident had been accidentally erased. They were demonstrating their impunity. The text came that night, from an unknown number. Parking lot behind the old cannery. 10 p.m. Let's end this, man to man. No cops. It was a trap. An amateurish, arrogant trap. Marcus's training screamed at him to ignore it. But David's words echoed in his mind, find its weaknesses. Their arrogance was their weakness. I'm going, he told Lena, whose face went ashen. No, Marcus, it's what they want. I know, he said calmly. But I'm not going alone. He called David, who simply said, "My nephew is trying out a new drone. Loves flying it over the industrial park. I'll let him know he might see something interesting." The old cannery was a skeleton of rust and broken windows. Marcus arrived early, moving through the shadows like a ghost, mapping sight lines, cover, and exits. This was his terrain now. He wasn't a victim walking into an ambush, he was a hunter observing his prey. Miller, Davis, and Russo arrived together, swaggering into the dim light cast by a single flickering floodlight. They were armed with collapsible steel batons. "Glad you could make it, hero," Russo sneered, extending his baton with a flick of his wrist. "No witnesses here." High above, silent and unseen in the night sky, a drone's camera switched to infrared. Marcus stepped out from behind a rusted container. "You're right," he said, his voice calm and carrying in the stillness. "There aren't." They came at him at once, a clumsy, uncoordinated rush. It was pathetic. Marcus flowed around Russo's wild swing, using the man's momentum to guide him into a pile of discarded pallets. He disarmed Davis with two precise movements, a block that hyperextended the man's elbow just enough to be excruciatingly painful, followed by a wrist lock that sent the baton clattering to the pavement. Miller swung wildly. Marcus sidestepped, his hand chopping down on Miller's forearm. Nerves screamed. The baton fell. Marcus didn't follow up with a punch. He used an open-handed push to shove Miller back, sending him stumbling over his own feet. In under 30 seconds, it was over. 3 armed men, neutralized by 1 unarmed veteran who hadn't thrown a single punch. He had been a phantom, a fulcrum, using their own force to defeat them. He stood over them, not with rage, but with a profound, weary disappointment. "It's done," he said. From the shadows, Russo pulled a small, snub-nosed revolver, a backup piece. "No," he hissed, his face twisted in a mask of pure hatred. "It's not." As he raised the gun, a brilliant beam of light suddenly erupted from the darkness, pinning him. A car engine roared to life. David Chen's old truck screeched into the lot, its high beams catching Russo, frozen like a deer. The high-pitched whir of the drone above was now clearly audible. Its small red recording light was an unblinking eye in the sky. Russo's face fell as he looked from the truck to the drone, the realization dawning. He wasn't the hunter. He was the specimen, pinned under the microscope. The drone footage was a nuclear bomb. Uploaded anonymously with the title, Oak Valley PD's Unofficial Policing, it went from a local curiosity to a national firestorm in less than 12 hours. The high-definition, time-stamped video was irrefutable. It showed 3 off-duty officers ambushing a man with weapons, and it showed one of them pulling a gun. Spliced with cell phone clips from the original pool incident, it painted a damning portrait of a racist, coordinated conspiracy. The FBI arrived 2 days later. The local internal affairs investigation was summarily taken over. Special agents from the Civil Rights Division set up a command post in the town hall. The story was on every major news network. The first arrests were swift and public. Federal agents, not local cops, took Russo, Miller, and Davis into custody at their homes. They were charged with federal crimes, conspiracy to violate civil rights, a charge that carried a sentence far beyond simple assault. The police chief was suspended, and Judge Cormac Russo's name was mentioned in federal affidavits regarding obstruction of justice. The town of Oak Valley was forced to look in the mirror. At a packed town hall meeting, other victims of Russo's reign of terror began to speak out, their voices strengthened by the national spotlight. The dam of silence had broken. Marcus and Lena watched it unfold from their living room. They were no longer isolated. A prominent civil rights law firm had taken their case pro bono. A fund started by veterans groups to cover their expenses had raised over $100,000. The victory was quiet, not triumphant. There was no joy in seeing men's lives ruined, only a somber relief that the truth had prevailed. A month later, Marcus stood before a group of young veterans in the basement of a community center. They were men and women like him, struggling to find their footing after returning from a world of war to a world that didn't understand them. They teach you how to be a weapon, Marcus said, his voice steady and clear. They teach you how to fight, how to survive. But they don't always teach you how to lay that weapon down. They don't teach you that the hardest fight is the one back here. The one for your peace. He wasn't a victim anymore. He wasn't a soldier. He was a guide. He had found a new mission, not in a dusty, foreign land, but here, in the quiet suburbs of his own country. He was helping other warriors navigate their way home, turning the discipline that had been forged in violence into a tool for healing. He was finally, truly, at peace.